They found her behind the smokehouse, barefoot and shivering. Her nightgown was torn, her small hands crusted with blood and soil. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she was pregnant, 9 years old. The man responsible, if you could even call him that, wasn't a stranger. He shared her blood, her jawline, her last name. What followed wasn't an investigation. It was a burial, not of a crime, but of a history so contaminated, so grotesquely unspeakable, that even the county coroner said, "Let the hills keep their secrets." But the hills don't keep secrets. Not forever. We traced the line back through rotting church records, family Bibles with pages torn out, whispers from former midwives now deep in dementia. Every trail led to the same name. One man, one house, one bloodline that never branched, only curled inward like a sick vine. His name was Warren Elbridge Holloway. Born in 1892 in a shack without a floor, delivered by a grandmother who was also, reportedly, his half-sister. Warren's life was documented in ink only once, on a marriage license to a cousin aged 12. The rest? Oral stories. Faded photographs. A growing list of girls in the family who never made it to 16. There was something wrong with all of them. Eyes too far apart, fingers fused, limps, twitches, blank stares. The town called them the river folk, as if they were a species separate from man. They lived just outside Pawsum Ridge, Tennessee, up a logging trail no one used, where trees grew too close and birds stopped singing by noon. Warren never held a job, never paid tax, never left that hollow. But children were born, generation after generation. All of them his. All of them doomed. This isn't just a story of inbreeding. It's a story of what happens when a family decides the world is too dangerous to trust. So they turn inward, again and again, until they forget what normal ever was. Until a child barely old enough to tie her shoes begins to show signs of pregnancy. And no one is surprised, because in that family, it had happened before. And it would happen again. The first time someone tried to report the Holloways was 1937. A traveling school teacher named Miss Little came through the ridge, hired to educate local children in a one-room shack near the creek. She lasted 5 weeks. On her final day, she arrived in town with a bruised cheek, torn shoes, a trembling voice. She told the sheriff she'd seen things no woman should ever see. Children with bruises shaped like ropes. Babies nursing from girls who should still be playing with dolls. A man whose stare made her feel like prey. She never said Warren's name. She didn't have to. The sheriff made the climb up to the Holloway homestead once. Just once. He took 2 deputies and a preacher for good measure. What they found was silence. A line of barefoot children standing in the yard, blinking like animals startled by light. Warren didn't greet them. He didn't speak. He only stood on the porch, a shotgun across his lap, a young girl, no more than 10, clutching his leg like a dog. The preacher begged him to let the children come down. Warren smiled. "They ain't yours," he said. "They ain't nobody's but mine." Legally, nothing could be done. The girls denied everything. Fearfully, mechanically, like they'd rehearsed it. The sheriff left. Within a month, Miss Little disappeared. Her suitcase was found floating in the river. Her body never was. The townfolk got the message. No one went back up there again. The Holloways weren't part of the county. They were a shadow on its edge, a curse no one dared lift. But every year, another girl vanished from the school registry. Another midwife was called in the dead of night. And always, the child born would bear the same features. A sunken nose, pale skin like wax, eyes that never blinked long enough. They were quiet children. They didn't cry. They didn't play. It was like joy had never been taught to them, like it had been bred out of them entirely. And still, no one intervened. Because by then, the Holloways were no longer seen as human. They were something else. A bloodline twisted beyond recognition. A family that had folded in on itself until the only things left were instinct. survival, possession, reproduction. And Warren, he was its architect, its priest, its god. In 1949, a fire broke out in the hills just west of the Holloway land. Dry lightning, they said. The blaze came down fast. By dawn, half the ridge was scorched. For the first time in decades, Warren and his children were seen in town. 8 of them, barefoot and ash-covered, standing in front of the county store like ghosts. The townspeople stared. No one approached. One boy's mouth hung open, crooked and toothless. A girl, maybe 7, had a swollen belly that didn't match her frame. The sheriff tried to ask questions. Warren just stared. "We'll go back when it cools," he said, and led them back into the smoke. But one didn't return. Her name was Elsie. They said she was around 9, though her bones suggested younger. She'd been left behind, maybe on purpose. A farm couple found her near the tree line, silent, covered in soot. She was taken in, fed, cleaned. But something was wrong. She didn't speak, not once. Wouldn't look anyone in the eye. When they gave her a doll, she buried it. When they offered a bath, she flinched like she was being struck. And when she began to show signs of pregnancy, the doctor wept. She wouldn't name the father. Couldn't. Wouldn't. The townspeople knew anyway. A blood test later confirmed what no one wanted to say out loud. She was carrying the child of her own blood. The story broke in the local paper for one day, then it disappeared. The sheriff said it was an error. The paper recalled all copies. The doctor who made the report left town. No charges were filed. No arrests. Warren was still alive, still breeding, and no one dared knock on his door. Elsie didn't survive the birth. The child did, pale as snow, joints twisted, eyes wide, unblinking. The county placed the baby in state care, though rumors say it was moved to a private home paid for by anonymous donors. One nurse claimed the child could hum at 2 weeks old. Another swore she heard the name Warren whispered during the night shift. No one believed her. Or maybe they just didn't want to. The house where Elsie died was abandoned. It still stands today. Boards warped, windows nailed shut, as if the building itself refuses to remember. But the land remembers. It always does. By the early 1960s, Pawsum Ridge was a ghost town in everything but name. The mines had closed. The train no longer stopped. And the children born on the outskirts never made it past their first birthdays. Except for the Holloways. They multiplied. Locals spoke in lowered voices about what they called the Inbred family. A joke, they said. But it wasn't a joke. It was a warning. The few who ventured near their land, surveyors, census workers, Jehovah's Witnesses, told stories afterward of strange sights. Girls carrying infants who looked older than they were. Boys with twisted hands leading livestock with human-like obedience. A figure always watching from a second-story window in the main house. Always the same shape. Always the same stillness. Warren was said to have grown ancient by then. White-haired, toothless, skin drawn so tight it cracked when he moved. But he still ruled them. Spoke commands only once. Punished infractions without delay. No outsiders ever witnessed it, but the after-effects were visible. Children with scars they wouldn't explain. Women who limped but never spoke of falls. Then came the journalist. He arrived under a false name. Claimed he was doing a book on Appalachian isolation. Spent 3 days near the ridge, camping, photographing, writing notes. No one ever found those notes. Only his camera, smashed and buried at the base of a tree. His body was discovered months later, partially decomposed, jaw shattered, tongue missing. The sheriff at the time ruled it animal predation. But there were no claw marks, no tooth patterns. Just one thing carved into the tree near the corpse. *hours. And so Pawsum Ridge was forgotten entirely. Not lost, erased. Roads leading to it were allowed to rot. Maps were redrawn. It vanished from gas station directories, as if the county wanted no trace left of what lived there. As if some higher office had made a decision, let the Holloways die quietly. But they didn't. The pregnancies continued. The births. Some say a few of the Holloway women were sent to state hospitals, renamed, reassigned. But their children, they carried something with them. Something not entirely human. Teachers in foster homes reported children who stared too long, never cried, and drew the same symbol again and again, an open eye inside a jagged circle. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? It was in 1978 that a woman named Clara showed up at a Knoxville trauma clinic, pregnant and alone. She claimed to be 23, but records suggested she was younger, 17 maybe. Malnourished. Nervous system damage. Her speech was stunted, her gaze vacant. When asked who the father was, she gave a name no one recognized, poor Warren. Not dad. Not father. Asterisk poor asterisk, like something from a family story passed down in whispers and bruises. Doctors noted deformities in the fetus. Severe ones. Spinal malformation, abnormal skull curvature. But Clara refused intervention. Said the child would be just like the others. When asked what she meant, she only smiled quietly, the way you might smile at a painting you've seen 1,000 times before. And when she finally gave birth, alone in the clinic bathroom, she bit through the umbilical cord herself and whispered into the newborn's ear before anyone could intervene. No one knows what she said, but nurses reported something strange. Every time they entered the room afterward, the infant stopped crying. Not calmed, the asterisk stopped star. As if it had never cried to begin with. As if it had been told, asterisk we don't do that here. Asterisk. Authorities traced Clara's lineage back through incomplete records and death certificates that had gone missing. But one thing kept repeating, the Holloway name. Faded on birth ledgers, misspelled on licenses, scratched out entirely on some school documents. But it was there. Over and over. The family that didn't branch, only looped. Clara disappeared before the child reached 6 weeks. One day she was holding it. The next, her bed was empty and the window was broken outward. Blood on the sill. No sign of struggle, no footprints, no noise. Nothing. Just a baby, still sleeping, still breathing. And one message scrawled in dried feces beneath the crib. Asterisk he's coming home. Asterisk. The clinic burned down within the year. Cause undetermined. Several staff members left town entirely. One nurse ended up institutionalized after reporting recurring dreams of a faceless man whispering genealogies into her ear. He would name children, dates, then lean in and say, "Now you." She'd wake screaming. By the early 80s, the Holloway name had officially vanished from Tennessee records. But names mean nothing when blood remembers. And their blood remembered everything. In 1993, an amateur genealogist named Richard Clemens started digging into his ancestry for a local Civil War heritage project. His father had been adopted, and there were gaps in the records that always bothered him. Missing birth certificates, relatives who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. But what disturbed him most was the silence. Every time he asked his aunts about the family's origins near Pawsum Ridge, they changed the subject or cried. Richard traced his line back to a girl named Leah Holloway, born 1911. No father listed. Mother unknown. Census documents placed her in a boarding house for feeble-minded women, as it was called back then, but she vanished from records at age 15. No death certificate, no marriage, just a blank space. The deeper Richard looked, the worse it got. Multiple birth records under different spellings, Holloway, Halloway, even Holloway. And each led back to the same region, same isolated creek, same rumors. Children born with webbed hands. Boys who didn't speak until they were 10. Girls who gave birth before they turned 12. And one name always there in the shadows, like a watermark burned into the lineage, Warren. Richard's obsession grew. He started visiting county courthouses, reading property deeds, poring over graveyard headstones covered in moss. One day, he found a small unmarked cemetery in the woods just east of the old homestead. 37 stones. No names, only numbers. Infant-sized graves, all hand-dug. He stayed there for hours, filming, talking to himself, whispering names he'd pieced together from whispers and archives. The next day, he posted a message on an obscure genealogy forum, *, I think I'm one of them. *. He never posted again. 3 days later, Richard was found dead in his home. Heart attack, the coroner said. But the body was covered in scratches. His own fingernails embedded in his chest. And carved into the floor beneath his chair was one word. *return. Authorities dismissed it. Said he had a psychotic break. But the forum remained, and others found it. One woman in Kentucky said she recognized the symbol Richard had posted, a jagged circle with an eye at its center. She said her grandmother used to draw the same thing in the margins of her Bible. Another man from West Virginia claimed he shared the Holloway bloodline, and that his daughter, age 8, had just started humming a tune she'd never been taught. And when he asked her where she learned it, she said, "He sang it to me." The man in the woods. There's a reason families don't speak of certain ancestors. A reason names disappear from family trees and photographs are turned face down in attic trunks. It isn't just shame. It's fear. Fear that what was buried might still be alive somewhere. Walking in shadows, humming lullabies meant for no one. In 2005, a private investigator named Janet Waller took on a missing persons case near the Kentucky-Tennessee border. A 14-year-old girl named Maggie had vanished from a foster home without a trace. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses, just an open window and a pile of dirt by the sill, like someone had crawled in from the ground. Janet followed the trail through old case files and forgotten corners of local bureaucracy. What she found was something chilling. 3 other missing girls, each from different towns, different homes, but all with the same detail in common: every one of them was descended from the Holloway line. She didn't want to believe it. Genetics don't stalk. Bloodlines don't abduct. But what she began to piece together couldn't be ignored. A map of disappearances clustered in a crescent along the old Appalachian routes. Rural girls, all young, all traceable to the same poisoned route. And then there were the sightings. Always the same, a tall, thin man with sunken eyes and a crooked mouth. Sometimes in barns, sometimes in fields, always watching, and always gone before anyone could speak. Janet pushed deeper. She requested sealed court records, psychiatric files, adoption histories. And in one folder, buried among decades-old foster logs, she found a note written by a caseworker in 1971. The handwriting was shaking, erratic. It read, "Some bloodlines don't end. They wait. They scatter, then pull back when the time is right. The Holloway children aren't gone. They're circling. Janet turned everything over to the state, but no action was taken. And 2 weeks later, she vanished. Her car was found at the base of a logging trail outside Porsum Ridge. The engine was still running, doors wide open. In the passenger seat, her recorder, static for 9 minutes, then a single whisper. He never stopped. That recorder is still in evidence storage, logged under a number, but never processed. And every few years, a new case arises. A child goes missing. A blood test comes back off. Records don't match. DNA markers cluster too closely. And always, there's something in the eyes. Because Warren Holloway is dead, but his design, his sickness, was never buried. It was inherited. Today, the Holloway name is gone from census records, erased from birth certificates. You won't find it in any school enrollment, driver's license, or obituary. But that doesn't mean the family is gone. It means they've adapted. Scattered into rural foster homes, married under different names, given new identities by overwhelmed case workers and sealed court orders. But the traits remain. Not just in the bone structure or the speech patterns. Something deeper. In the behavior. Children who rock silently for hours. Infants who resist being held but stare unblinking for minutes at a time. Girls who speak in riddles about the man in the cellar or the cold room with no corners. You'll find them if you look closely. In Mississippi, in Arkansas, in the back roads of Missouri, places where state officials rarely visit and neighbors know better than to ask questions. There's one town, never named on a map, nestled in the forest past the Cumberland line, where a retired nurse claims she delivered 2 babies in the same week, both from girls under 12, both pale, silent, and watched over by men who claimed to be uncles but offered no ID. She said she still dreams about those births. Said the room filled with a smell she couldn't describe, wet leaves, old meat, and something like iron. And when the babies cried, it wasn't a sound. It was more like a warning. Then there's the coroner in West Virginia who keeps a private notebook. Not for the dead, but for those almost dead. Cases where the DNA doesn't align, where a newborn's genetic markers match too closely with its mother, where even computers flag the entries, * non-viable match, possible replication error. But it's not an error. It's a loop. A closed circuit of blood rerunning a program that should have ended generations ago. Some say Warren Holloway had over 30 children. Others say it was closer to 100. No one will ever know for sure because numbers don't matter when the blood keeps folding inward like a black hole of lineage, consuming memory, identity, even sanity. There's a rumor that in certain Appalachian valleys, mothers still hum a lullaby passed down from nowhere. No lyrics, just a slow, dragging melody that curls through barns and fields like smoke. And if you follow it, they say, you'll find a child alone, watching, not afraid, waiting. And if you ask their name, they won't answer. They'll only say, * he told me not to. The Holloways are no longer a family. They're a pattern. And it's not finished.